Good evening. So it's a warm welcome from England, actually. I flew in 2 days ago and I'm here till the 21st. I come twice a year to come and stay with Renee, who has been really wonderful in promoting the very unique way that I work. I live in the south of England. I have been working with complementary healing and therapies since 1993, training in Reiki. And then in 2000, I met Master Choa Sui, who is a pranic healing master, and trained with him. And I'm a teacher of pranic healing in the UK. But there is another side to the journey that I've been on. And I work with an amazing set of roses. Now, the roses have come with me all through my life. My grandfather was a professional gardener, and he had a rose garden in front of his little cottage in the New Forest in England. And I learned at a very early age that the rose garden was a sacred place. And he lived on a forest road, and there were forest animals that used to go up and down outside. And he had a little shovel by the gate. And he was waiting for opportunist manure to be dropped in his pathway to be able to put on his beloved roses. And I learned very early on that the roses are, in fact, an alchemical plant. I mean, they process the SHIT of life and take it into fragrance and beauty and, these amazing blossoms. And the roses flourish with, really good hot manure. So my grandmother was Rosa Kate and my sister was Rosemary, so I really was surrounded by roses. And the journey life has taken me on a journey. And for 18 years, I was couture wedding dress designer. And not only did we make roses, we worked with silk and antique French textile, but we made silk roses to go on the dresses. And of course, all of the women that came into my shop for their dresses all had a unique story to tell. And what was really interesting for me was this weave of how this woman had actually found and met in all of these millions of people on the planet. She'd met this person who was so special to her that she was going to marry. And she'd pitched up in my shop for a frock. So I've been fascinated for years about relationship and what the attractor factor is, what brings us together with people, and also how our bodies deal with our lives, are the story of our lives. And I suppose looking at energy healing modalities, well, that started because my daughter had asthma, and I felt so powerless as a mother that somebody said to me, Reiki would be really good, Reiki would be really helpful, and I went off to find myself a class to see whether I could, breathing is fairly fundamental, and, my daughter was struggling. So this set me out on really a journey of discovery. And as I say, I worked within the healing modalities once my wedding dress time had come to an end. But 5 years ago, I went off to the Alhambra in Spain. I'd been photographing roses for several years. They'd been sort of calling me, and I got to the Alhambra and at rose time. And the rose gardens, has anybody been to the Alhambra in Spain? The rose gardens there are absolutely exquisite. And the roses were saying, photograph me, no, photograph me, and me, and me. Mm-hmm. And I came back with all of these images on my camera and loaded them on the computer. And a couple of days later, I got up one morning and there was a little voice that went off in my head that said, you'll put 11 of us together and work with us. And instead of going, no way, I went down to the computer and gradually pulled together this, what turned out to be the original set of 11 roses that I was to work with. And you'll see them on my stand. They're set in a mandala. And each one of the roses told me where they worked in the body and how they wanted to work and the emotional story that they'd come to heal. Now, the rose is a really interesting flower. It's a very particular geometry. The rose doesn't open. She has 5 sepals around the bud, and they don't open consecutively. They open in the same way that you would draw a 5-pointed star. Yeah? And this particular geometry of the 5-pointed star, the pentagram, has a ratio, a geometric ratio embedded within it, which is the golden mean ratio, this golden mean spin. And that is the same as the Nautilus. This is the same geometry. And this is a geometry that can compress exponentially and expand exponentially. And when our hearts are resonating cleanly to this geometry, there is a golden field of energy that is created around the heart. Now, the heart is a magnetic organ. The heart will attract to it, through its frequency, opportunities and experiences and people into our lives. So when we come into relationship with another, we come in as a match. So this geometry sends out a wave, a frequency wave, that attracts to us a person that's carrying an energy that matches, which is why we can meet people that we feel that we've known forever. You know, that there is a comfort, an ease. So this work that I've been developing with the rose is all about healing the heart, because it's now been proven scientifically that the heart in love, guess what, resonates to 1 to 1.61803 recurring. And it's not a stable geometry. The heart geometry is a dynamic geometry. You know, if for those of you that are in the healing arts that work or send prayer or healing to others, this is the geometry, this is the carrier wave through the heart that makes sure that our prayers and our good wishes and our love get to their destination. Because nothing stops that geometry. When that heart geometry is working, we cannot get sick. Right? The thing that inhibits us in this heart geometry is when we've got stories, wound, trauma that we've not been able to process. And that inhibits this field. You know? Anubis in the Egyptian pantheon weighed the heart against a feather at the time of passing. And what we're being asked to have is hearts that are as light as feathers. And the only way we can do that is to deal with our stuff. And that's what the roses do, because the rose speaks to the heart. Her geometry is a match, and she reminds us of our beauty. She reminds us of our perfection. And each one of the roses that I work with works with a different emotional story, a different emotional part of our journey, you know? And we've each, just like the women that used to come in from the wedding dresses, and I'd want to know what their story was. So as I work with the roses and healing with the roses, the important thing is understanding the story and, you know, how life is, how you're experiencing life. because it all comes from here. Everything comes from the inside out. So if you see something outside here that you don't like, you don't enjoy, this is in here. This is where you need to look. What do I need to change? If you experience betrayal, where do you betray yourself? You know, all of these pieces, if you can look at what you're experiencing, will give you the answers. They'll way show you to the next piece, to the next piece. And the more we can come to this place of the golden heart, the more our hearts are lit, the DNA fires, the brain chucks out good endorphins, and we feel happy. You know, there's a lit heart. When our hearts are alight, we can light the hearts of others. It's, you know, just a beautiful process. So what I was going to do, if I had a volunteer, was to well, you're closest. Come. I just would like you to come and sit on the chair. I'm just going to show you a little bit about how the rose works. Sorry, what was your name? Emmy. It's Emmy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to douse Emmy's inner aura. So at the current state, this is where her inner aura sits. What I like to do is to just hold the rose and just almost breathe it in, but connect to it at a heart level. Can you just tell me when you're there? So once again, I'm going to douse Emmy's inner aura. So the energy field has started to expand just by the connection that she's made to that rose. And you know, there's no happenstance to the saying, you know, stop and smell the roses. Yeah? I mean, just even if you're working in an office, if you just bought a rose and put it on your desk, it would make the day different. You know, if you've got a room that hasn't got much chi, much energy to it, buy a bunch of roses and put in it, and you'll just be amazed at how the room feels. You know, the rose, her oil, the rose oil. It's a second mortgage to get a bottle of it, but it resonates at 328 hertz. Our little brains resonate at 78. You know, this is one of the highest. Well, it's the highest frequency oil that you can get, and it's why it's used for anointing kings and queens. It's an activation using that sort of frequency. So, I'm finished. So those of you that have visited my stand have probably noticed that there's these energy cards, and at the moment I handprint them, and they're only available through the workshops, but I'm very shortly having them printed in a slightly different way, and they will be available to buy, but I'm doing a book that goes with them. But they are energy charged and they work in a certain way in the body. So I would just like to look at the card, look at the rose, breathe it in, and then put that card against your heart. I'm now looking for Emmy's inner aura. So you can start to see what's beginning to happen. Her energy field is beginning to get stronger and larger. And you could say, well, you know, what's the use of that? actually what it does is it really starts to strengthen and connect you to yourself to start with. It's particularly valuable when you're traveling and you're in dense energy places to start to get this strengthened energy field. And we'll do a head swap. And if you could just get up and just put that on you. After I'd been playing with the rose energies for a few years, as I say, I used to make frocks. I had got a lot of silk left around, and the roses whispered in my ear and said, "We'd like you to print us on silk." And I found how to do it. So I hand print and hand make these energy mats at the moment. I thought I was making cushions to start with, but they were energy mats, so they roll up and go in your pocket. And when I was coming over on one of these trips to offer my classes here, I made these rose mats and I sat on them, or sat on one of them, flying over. And I was as bright when I got off at New York as I was when I got on at London. And I got no jet lag on the way back, which was quite extraordinary. And I had them polyinterference scanned, PIP scanned by a chap called Dr. Harry Oldfield, a very eminent explorer in this sort of thing. And he showed this sort of amazing aura and pattern, energy pattern, that was apparent on the pieces of silk that I was making. And when they were connected with the human energy field, they gravitated in and strengthened the body. So, I won't go far enough away, I don't think. I'll be in the fireplace. But this is what's happening to her energy field. From a flying point of view, silk is an insertive textile, and you don't know who's sat on that seat before you, and especially long haul, they were there a long time. You don't know their condition, you don't know how life was for them, and there's an energy imprint that's left in the seat. And from my training as a pranic healer, if you're meditating, you never meditate in a place with soft furnishing without silk protecting the base chakra. And so that was my thinking as I developed these, but that's what it does. It creates a shield on the base chakra, so the base chakra is not picking up residue energies that are in the space. But how are you feeling? But what it does is it strengthens that inner core in the body and strengthens the auric field. And there's just this wonderful feeling that in the heart, as you start to connect with those energies, they move up into the heart and the heart expands. So if you're on the aircraft, you don't pick up what's on the seat. You don't pick up other people's stuff around you. You're in a bit of a bubble when it comes to the low oxygen. And what happens when you're over 30,000 feet, you're out of the Schumann resonance of the earth. So what this geometry does, this sacred geometry of the golden mean, reminds your body of its connection to Mother Earth, to the growth principle of all things. And so it's a bit of a win-win, really. There's a benefit to it. So yeah, that's where my playing is at the moment, and I produce little power pouches as well to put crystals and things in which also support and help the body. Thank you. So I invite you. We've got a Rose Retreat Day tomorrow at Renee's Place in Hope. Which is, sorry guys, it's only for women, but it's a really lovely retreat day, a real day of nourishment and self-love. And on Sunday, I hold the first of the Rose classes, the Rose 1 class, which is all to do with personal healing. It's in working on the body. and I fly back on the 21st. So I hope you might find an opportunity to come and talk with me at the stand, and I've hoped you've enjoyed and been inspired by a little bit of rosiness. Thank you.